walls of lies, the perfect end. The world's a stage, they run the flow. You clap on cue down in the front row.
Welcome back, guys and gals. So picture this. It's the year 1919. Europe lies in ruins after the slaughter of World War I. We have 10 million soldiers that are dead. Ancient empires have collapsed. And the victors in Paris redraw the map amid exhaustion and disagreement. In a small square in Milan, Piazza San Sepolcro, butchered that name, was a wounded veteran, former socialist journalist expelled for his own party for supporting Italy's entry into the war, stands before a crowd. And he launches a new movement with and names it something no political party had used before. The Fasci Italiani di... It's Italian. I can't speak Italian. Okay, and it basically meant the fighting bands of Italy. Okay, and so his name is Benito Mussolini, and the word that he introduces to the world is fascism. And it will become one of the most powerful, feared, and ultimately misused terms in modern history. And so that is kind of our focus. Like, we're going to talk about fascism tonight, but our real focus is the misuse of terms and terminology and how the system is playing all of us, because the system is very good at changing definitions, okay? And if there's one thing that our laws and lawyers love to rally behind is the definition of a word, and that can either make or break your case, okay? So tonight on Breaking the System, we return to the beginning. We examine what fascism actually was, its origins, its documented features, and what it did in practice. Then we confront the harder question: how did a specific historical system turn into a catch-all insult hurled across the political spectrum? Okay, and we've not necessarily seen fascism lately, but another big one across the board recently is Nazi, right? Everyone on both sides of both parties of the political system, if they don't agree with you, well, you're just a Nazi, right? Just plain and simple, you're a Nazi and you're a Nazi and you're a Nazi and they call us a Nazi and everyone's Nazis, right? And so when insults get hurled like that from both sides on this political spectrum, does that word hold any validity? And that's kind of the backbone of this episode, okay? And so what do we lose as a civilization when a precise word is hollowed out until it means little more than something I strongly dislike? So no more score settling, just the historical record. So buckle in. Episode 53, I believe we are on. And this one is Fascism, the word that lost its meaning. And like I said, we're going to focus on fascism, but really we can apply this to almost any word across the board. Okay? So let's look at the symbol and its roots. So what happened before Mussolini? So the word fascism did not originate with Mussolini. It traces back roughly 2,500 years to ancient Rome. The Latin fasces was a bundle of wooden rods bound together around an axe blade, carried by lictors as a symbol of magisterial authority and the power to punish. And the bundle illustrated a core idea. Individual sticks break easy, but if we bound them together, they're strong. So in essence, unity equals strength. And the axe here represented the state's overall power over life and death. And so this symbol long predated fascism, carried neutral or positive connotations of collected authority. It appeared in the Republic in France and in the early United States, including on the armrest of Abraham Lincoln's chair in the Lincoln Memorial. And so in that instance, it was built to honor the president who served the Union in trying to unify or pull together all of the states at the time. Okay? And so the fasces here evoked resolve and national unity, not totalitarianism. And in the late 19th and early 20th century, Italy, fasci, often referred to labor or socialist groups using the bundle imagery for worker solidarity. The symbol itself was not inherently sinister. Mussolini repurposed it for his own movement. Once again, where have we seen this? Well, the Nazi symbol is not originally the Nazi symbol. That symbol was there way before that political aspect of it took it and gave that symbol, they changed it just a little bit, but they gave that symbol a different meaning entirely. Okay? And that's important. Not only as we put past to present, but as we put present into the future. What are some of the symbols that we have today, and how will future generations change those symbols into meaning something completely different than what they mean today? Right? That's something we have to think about. And so let's look at the birth of a system. Let's look at post-war Italy and Mussolini's shift. So Italy entered World War I on the Allied side in 1915, expecting territorial gains and glory. And it suffered around 600,000 military deaths, and they felt cheated by the post-war peace treaties, the so-called mutilated victory, they called it, the economic collapse, socialist unrest spread, and factory occupations, strikes, and political violence was on the rise. Political politicians struggled to respond, and many Italians turned to radical alternatives. Okay? So Mussolini had been a prominent socialist, editor of the party newspaper Avanti, but the Italian Socialist Party expelled him in 1914 for advocating Italian intervention in the war. And the party maintained neutrality and or opposition during this time. So war experience and national humiliation shifted his thinking. Nationalism replaced class struggle as his central creed. And the nation, not the international proletariat, became his focus. So he was focusing on the change of the nation. And on March 23rd of 1919, in Milan's Piazza San Sepolcro, Mussolini founded the Fasci Italiani di combattimento, like I'm butchering this name because it's Italian. Like I can't speak Italian. I apologize. Okay. But it was a hybrid movement, an anti-communist, yet drawing from revolutionary nationalists and these traditions. Initially anti-clerical and left-leaning in tone before moving rightward. It attracted war veterans, futurists, and other disillusioned with the status quo. And by 1922, Mussolini's black shirts, which was the parliamentary squad, had grown very powerful. In October, roughly 30,000 marched on Rome in a show of force. And so King Victor Emmanuel III refused to declare martial law and instead appointed Mussolini as prime minister, allowing him to form a government. Very interesting, right? It's very interesting that he wouldn't declare martial law. And so over the following year, Mussolini consolidated his power. He dismantled democratic institutions. He suppressed oppositional newspapers and the parties. He banned strikes and independent labor unions and created a political police. He declared himself El Deuce, the leader, and established a one-party rule. And so that's one thing here in America, like we have to be very, very careful about in trying to dismantle the current system, is that we don't want to dismantle it so much so that we get rid of all the other parties and we've only got one party, one leader. We definitely don't want that by any means, okay? So that's something we have to be very, very careful with. And so what fascism actually was, let's look at its core features. So historians debate nuances, but core elements of Italian fascism are well documented. It featured ultranationalism and the myth of national rebirth after perceived decadence. It also featured supremacy of the state over the individual. Mussolini and his philosopher Giovanni Gentile articulated this in 1932, the doctrine of fascism. Fascists' conception of the state is all-embracing. Outside of it, no human or spiritual values can exist. Everything within the state, nothing outside the state, and nothing against the state. And so the idea was the state was totalitarian in its aspiration, okay? And a synthesis of all values and interpretations became the nation's will. So nothing can exist outside of the state. So everything has to be within the state and for the state and solely by the state, okay? And so that's the idea here, supremacy of it. It also featured the dictatorial rule by having a charismatic leader who embodied the nation as a whole. We also have to look at the features of corporatism, an economic system subordinating both labor and capital to the national interest through state-mediated corporations. Okay, so these were almost like guild-like bodies. If you've ever done like an RPG, or if you've been in like a big gaming community online, right? The gaming community makes a guild, and so like everything that you do in the game is built in and around the survival of the guild, and like you don't want to be caught doing things outside of the guild, or you can get kicked out, you can get rejected, okay? So this idea, it rejected both liberal capitalism and Marxist class struggle in favor of class collaboration under what? Well, the state directive, okay? Right? So all the rules, once again, had to come from the state in making sure that this economy was a corporate economy. And so lastly, it featured the suppression of opposition, glorification of action, violence, militarism, and hierarchy. Democracy and liberalism were dismissed as being weak and or outdated. So we got to cut both of those things out altogether, okay? So that was the 5 core values that fascism brought with it, okay? So fascism positioned itself as a third way, revolutionary, yet nationalist, anti-individualist, no being an individual, right? And it opposed both parliamentary democracy and internal communism. It emphasized duty, struggle, and the organic unity of the nation. Okay, so it wanted all 3 of those things to exist. Okay? And so let's look at how this idea spread. Let's look at Italy versus Nazism for a second. So Mussolini's success inspired imitators across Europe, including Oswald Mosley's British Union of Fascists and Tactical Lessons of Adolf Hitler's in 1923, Bear Hall, Putsch, Putschsch, okay? So Germany's National Socialism shared authoritarian structure, a one-party rule, a leader cult, but radicalized the model with biological racism and anti-Semitism as central organizing principles. And so early Italian fascism did not emphasize these. Anti-Semitic laws appeared only in 1938 under alliance pressure from Nazi Germany. And many early Italian fascists resisted or viewed them as foreign imports, right? And so Italian fascism prioritized, once again, the state and the union. Nazism made race the existential core, leading to genocide and total war. So it's kind of the difference between them, okay? And so conflating the two entirely erases important historical distinctions. Though both were authoritarian, ultranationalist systems that subordinated the individual to a collective vision enforced by the state. So, once again, you have one, which was fascism, which is everything existed for the existence of the state, where Nazism existed for a race over anything else. Okay? That was kind of the difference between the two in the beginning. And so let's look at the weaponization. We're going from description to when it became an insult. Okay? So the dilution began early. In the late 1920s, the Communist International promoted the social fascism theory, labeling moderate social democrats as the moderate wing of fascism to justify attacking them as primary enemies. This is where politics come into play, right? Once again, if you don't agree with your political adversary, what do? Well, you attack them by calling them names. Oh, well, that's going to hurt them. That's going to make them, like, if we label them a certain label, then people's not going to agree with them because they're going to be labeled this, right? Like, and that's something that humans are very, very good at. Humans, we want to label everything. We want to apply a label to everything. And so you have to fit into this nice little box or whatever, right? And so we're going to label you, okay? And that's what's happening here. And so mutual accusations flew between the communists and the socialists. Like what's happening right now between the Democrats and the Republicans. Once again, right, we sit back, we think about it, we look at it from a different perspective. They're two birds of the same feather. right? Communists and socialists were, once again, there were two birds of the same, or two feathers of the same bird, or two wings of the same bird, sorry. We also apply that to today. We look at the Democrats and the Republicans, two separate wings, right? But they're two separate wings of the same bird, okay? And so that's where we get the shift from one wing to the next by the justification of attacking people just through words, okay? And that's why the First Amendment is so important in the United States. We have to be careful of what we're doing with the First Amendment, right? It's an all-powerful amendment. And so once we start changing the definition of things, it's going to start putting more pressure on, should we start limiting speech, or should we start calling certain types of speech something else, right? It's all about the definition, okay? So by 1939, some observers equated Hitlerism is brown communism, and Stalinism is red fascism. Once again, we're just naming things. We're just applying a name to it. And so highlighting totalitarian parallels between the two. And in 1944, while the war against actual fascism raged, George Orwell observed that fascists, quote unquote, had become nearly meaningless. He noted it applied to farmers and shopkeepers and fox hunting and Gandhi and dogs, and often meaning little more than something cruel, something unscrupulous, someone that's arrogant, or someone that's anti-liberal. Right? They changed the definition to the word. Okay? They tried to do this a couple years ago, right? They're constantly trying to change the definition of words to make it so the definition appears more comfortable, so they can draw you in, draw you from one side to the other side, okay? That's what they want to do. That they're very good at this. I'm talking about the people in the power, okay? They're in power for a reason. That's why you and I are not. So after 1945, revelations of Nazi horrors made fascism the ultimate symbol of evil. This moral weight encouraged overuse. The term delegitimized opponents entirely. On one side, it targeted policies seen as authoritarian or nationalist. On the other side, expansive state power or cultural shifts were sometimes labeled fascist, noting Mussolini's socialist roots and corporatist economics. Both approaches risk category errors, equating specific historical totalitarianism with routine disagreements. So, if you don't agree with me, I'm going to call you a fascist. Just like if I don't agree with you, I'm going to call you a fascist, and that's what they were doing. And so, the idea here is that when fascist describes everything from death camps to minor regulations, semantic satiation sets in, and the word loses impact through repetition. And that's the whole idea here, is that we can apply this to any word across the board. And when we start changing the definition of words to encompass our enemies because they don't agree with us, okay, it delegitimizes the word outright. It takes all value, it takes all meaning away from that particular word, whether if it is fascism, or whether if it's Nazism, or whether if it's MAGA, or liberal, or whatever the word is, right? We apply it across the board, and all definitions of all words then lose meaning, because we're not applying true meaning. We're just making shit up on the fly. And if everybody's a fascist, And if everybody's a Nazi, and if everybody's a liberal, and if everybody's a MAGA, then everybody hates everybody. And that's how they keep us divided. And that's how the system wins. Okay? Sit back and really think about it. That's what's going on. All right? So, don't get me wrong, fascism was real, and it did have a birthplace, and that was March 23rd, 1919 in Milan. And the architect, we know, was Benito Mussolini. Core features historians broadly agree upon: ultra-nationalism, dictatorial one-party rule, state supremacy, everything within the state, for the state, by the state, with the state, right? Corporatism, suppression of pluralism, and militaristic rebirth. That's the definition of what makes up fascism. It arose from specific war or post-war crisis and was defeated militarily in 1945. And the word survived. And it done what? It transformed into a blunt political weapon in its own tragedy. A term precise enough to describe a destructive system became, as Orwell warned, roughly synonymous with something I dislike. Orwell wrote about it. Very, very good book. Very, very good writer. You should look that up. Read his book. And that loss is not merely linguistic. It weakens collective memory and the ability to recognize patterns of authoritarianism when they emerge. We have to be able to see these patterns existing within history. We have to be able to pull them out and be like, yep, there it is. Yep, there it is. Without our own emotions coming into play. Okay? So patterns like erosion of pluralism, cults of personality, or total claims on society by the state. We have to be able to recognize these within history and leave our own personal emotion and conflict out of it. Okay? Does it stand weight by itself, by its original definition? That's the word. Across the board. Like I said, doesn't matter if it's fascism or Nazism or what it is, whatever the word is, okay? So here's our critical thinking question for the night, because we always end with a critical thinking question. So put on your tinfoil hats, and here we go. If the word fascism once described a specific political system with documented origins and features and historical consequences, yet has been stretched, right, by various factions into a general insult for anything authoritarian or anything nationalist or anything we simply disliked, then here's the question we're sitting with for tonight. When we use powerful historical terms as weapons rather than precise descriptions, are we strengthening our defenses against real authoritarianism, or are we eroding the shared vocabulary needed to identify and confront things like this when it reappears in new forms? Because it will. Remember, history always repeats itself. It's in a different dress. Sometimes it's dressed up in a top hat. Sometimes it's wearing a beanie. Sometimes it's in a cowboy hat. Sometimes it's on a baseball cap. Okay? All hats have different color. But it's still the same thing. Okay? So that's our question for the night. Okay? So these systems of the past are gone, and whether the words we inherit still carry meaning and whether we can still use them responsibly, that's up to us. Especially us as Americans. Especially when we take into account the First Amendment. Right? The most powerful thing in all of human history, I personally think, is our ability to have the First Amendment. And once we start changing definition to all words, then by right does any word have definition for itself. does any word have meaning anymore. Okay? So with that, this is Breaking the System. I appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. As always, I would love to hear your comments. Whether you agree with me or disagree with me, put the comments down below. Like, share this to people that you agree with, people that you disagree with, and have a good night. God bless, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.